Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from PS23 Psychedelic Science, the world's largest psychedelic conference to date, with 12,000 people in attendance. And I'm sitting here with one of my old friends, East Forest. So East Forest actually just played a really epic show here for Psychedelic Science for Propeller here in Denver. And it's interesting. I was reflecting on when I first met you. It was at a show for about 20 people, and it was a show. And it was one of the most epic nights of my last 15 to 20 years. And East Forest, let's talk about a little bit of your work and what's been going on and what you think of this experience being here at this large conference. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the psychedelic space.
You know, when you say PS23, I think, from being an old New Yorker, I immediately was like, what is, I thought, yeah. People, that's stupid, yeah, public New York jokes. I walked in here and the first thing I thought was remembering there are early gatherings or whatever, you know, they were so underground and small, and that's all it was. There wasn't anything else. There wasn't even stuff online. It wasn't cool. I remember going back to the city. We'd be upstate doing ceremony, essentially with our extended community friends and then their friends. And people thought it was weird. Like they were concerned for me. What are you doing up there? Just what? You take psychedelics? What? You crazy? You're sitting in a room at a farm, and then I walk in here and there's all these people. And one half of me was excited. Like, oh, it's happening in a sense. Like, I have never seen this many people in one gathering for that reason. And the other thing was like ambivalence.
And hi, everybody. We actually have a surprise visit from Robin Carhart-Harris. Robin Carhart-Harris.
Hello.
How is it to be a celebrity here at Psychedelic Science, the world's largest psychedelic conference to date?
Right. Mixed feelings on that one.
Good to hear. Yeah, that's what we were just talking about.
It's a little overwhelming.
Coming from being the weirdos, right? Were you known as the weirdo doing psychedelics? And then
In the margins, yeah. Kind of people raising their eyebrows about doing the work. And okay, good luck with that. I've had that a few times. My mum would say, won't you do something, something that's a bit easier for you? You know, she would see me struggling against the tide and say, why don't you do something like other people are doing?
Let's do it.
Well, that's it too.
Bye,
All
nice
right.
to meet
See you, Robin.
Nice.
So I was saying, I had feelings of ambivalence, and I'm not totally sure why. And maybe it's just like the shock of where things were and where they are, and also where's it going, and it feels like everyone here is a startup or something. You know, everyone's promoting something or trying to network in a certain way, and even that, I just don't know what to feel. Yeah. So how do you feel?
Yeah, that's actually been how I've been feeling. I actually got sick on day 2, and then it kind of put me in a little bit of a foul mood, and started feeling like, oh, how do I even feel about this? Because it is a little bit weird. Like there's a little bit of that feeling of like, where's the sacredness? But which I think a lot of people are feeling. And then there's also the excitement of like, wow, this is really real. Like the world wants this. At least 12,000 people want it. And there's definitely a lot of the startups. And I keep saying there's probably maybe an oversaturation in the mushroom world already. Like how many microdoses do people need per day?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I guess if we have 8 billion people microdosing, we're going to need some of those. But it's been interesting and a little weird, and also exciting, especially exciting for people like you. Like I've seen you, and when I first met you and first heard your music, which was so profound, especially in the ceremonial space, I remember I was like, how do you even categorize this music? It was like, oh, it's kind of like yoga music. You know? I know.
How dare you?
But you were so ahead of your time, and I mean, on some level, ancient and ahead. And we were just talking actually off camera about this idea of music and the importance of music in the psychedelic space. And let's talk legit, like psychedelic therapy or ketamine therapy or, now psilocybin, which is happening legally, at least in one state. And how, to me, it's so obvious that music is actually number one, up there with the medicine and then obviously maybe the space holder. And I said three. Yeah. Exactly, right? Set and setting, right? On some level. And I recently curated my own list for myself, and I realized, I was like, wait, there's not a lot of music out there that is, first of all, long, continuous songs. And intentional. And also, because I've asked people for their playlists, like in my Facebook group, and when I saw them, I was like, your playlist reminds me of the playlist I listen to when I'm driving, which is a bunch of medicine music, 3 to 5 minutes. And I actually was like, wow, I think there's a market for this. And I realized my friends are doing this. So let's talk about your views on the music and the role of music in this space.
Well, it's weird. I don't know if there's a market that's the gosh. I mean, for me, it's a subject I think about a lot. I didn't anticipate 15 years ago when we were, doing this, that there would be a conference like this, or that there would be publicly traded companies, or that there would be a commercial aspect. And when I even released my album Music for Mushrooms, so that was in 2019. And before that, the ceremony music guidance albums I'd released, I didn't say that's what it was for, because I was like, it wasn't really safe to do that. And it wasn't until 2019 I thought, like, okay, now I think it's time to just be like, yeah, Music for Mushrooms, a soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner. Like, as how obvious can you? I want it to be that obvious. 5 hours, start to finish. It's sort of like we've been cooking this up for 11 years at that point, and we have something to share that we developed as a community, a protocol through music. And it really was like a technology through music that we had developed. And there's something there. And it was like, well, let's not just hold this in its private way. Maybe it's time to share it more broadly. And when it came out, so recorded it in 2018 at the farm. Yeah. So it's an improvised weekend of music in ceremony, which is the way I do it. And then it took about a year to edit it, master it, and get it out. So 2019, it came out during the cycle with the Ram Dass album. And it came out, and 2 weeks later, right here in Denver and Oakland, was near that, did the Decrim stuff. And I remember people saying, great timing, like, how'd you know? And it's like, I didn't, but we're all picking up on a similar wavelength. And it's even at that moment, it was still kind of like, ooh, I don't know. Like, and here we are just a few years later, 4 years later, and now it's this. And there's stocks you can buy and stuff. And so when I released that album or other albums before that, like Crystal Starship or Music to Die To, that kind of stuff, it's like that was all from mushroom ceremonies. And some people figured it out, and they're like, that's what it's great for, but not everybody. And I always just sort of had the attitude of, I want to make tools for people to use, and people are out there doing this in the underground. I want to help. And now it's above ground. I just never thought like, oh, okay, now there's a ketamine clinic using it that might be charging thousands of dollars, and I don't know. I'm like, how do we do this or interface? Or like the event we did a couple days ago, that was like a public event, and I've been dancing in this space of doing public events where you're mixing these elements of those original ceremonies, the same sort of elements, but just scaling it to 500 people, or could it be bigger? And is that safe? Does it matter? Is it ethical? Is there a better way to do it? How do you do the sound deployment? All these questions, how do you support people? Legality. How do you cover sound across, and there's all these things that come up that's been actually harder to crack those codes. It's a work in progress. And so I don't know, this is just trying to say, like, it's come a long way. And in a lot of ways, we haven't changed a lot of what was going on originally. It's just like scaling it, and there's an interest level that's different. And even for me, too, being here is odd because I can't think of many places that I could go. And I'd be like, people would know what I'm up to and doing. And here there's a lot of them, because just hearing from people who are using the music in their work, there's a lot of therapists here too. And that's meaningful, you know, when you make something by yourself or in small groups, and then to hear how it's kind of out there resonating in the world.
Yeah, it's so funny because I remember, I think I was actually at 2 of those recordings of your albums, but I was definitely at the Music for Mushrooms. And I remember actually, while I was in that ceremony, deep in it, I remember being kind of like, why are there so many wires in the room this time? I actually do remember that. I remember picking up on more, I think you had more instruments than normal recording that day. Because I remember being kind of like, something's different. But then there was a whole family there, the whole crew. And it's beautiful because I also, that happened to me at the same time, where it was like something kept coming through me over and over and over, where I was already working with people on the psychedelic path or on the medicine path. And then there's this voice, you know, this maybe higher self creator voice coming through saying, well, maybe you need to come out and speak about this. And like, stop hiding this part of yourself that's been so influential for 30 years. You know, like if I look back to my teenage years, I don't think I would even studied psychology and, you know, gone the route I did and had the spiritual awakenings I did without the psychedelics playing a very key part at a very young age. And the whole experience, and not just the LSD or the mushrooms, it was always the music. It was never without the music, unless it was like out for a hike maybe. But it was always in a music setting with the music that went really well with the psychedelics. Yeah. And that was what was so interesting that we were just talking about, where I, you know, full disclosure, this is like one of my professional low moments. I still have not done actual ketamine therapy. And I probably should by now because I've interviewed enough people. But to go and do ketamine therapy and not have the like kind of curated musical experience doesn't even make sense to me. Like, how is that going to be as impactful? You know, but I think you're right. Like, we're at a different scale and there's a different interest. And I'm curious, did people recognize you, you know, in the hallway? Like, you're a celebrity now.
If I take my hat off, yeah, it's like Clark Kent. If I put it on, it's less people. Yeah, it's far more than I would anticipate, to be honest. I've only had one person who was extremely angry and rude, and then everyone, I've had, you know, another 100 that have been awesome and sweet. I think the person was like, did the wrong drugs. And I'm not even going to give them airtime. Yeah, it was really weird. I'll tell you about it later. But what were we talking about?
Oh, about how this is, the music is so important in the ketamine space. Yeah,
but you know, in maybe it was Mendel Kaling who said that it was the silent therapist, the music. And you said earlier about this trifecta, right? Like, so you have the medicine, and then basically the person who's there helping you, if there is someone, and then I think the music. Yeah. And in many cases, it's really kind of the medicine and the music because the person's not holding much space. Or perhaps, I've been seeing many things with ketamine clinics, they give you the ketamine and they leave, actually.
Yeah. Or they send it to you in the mail.
Or that. But even at these clinics, like they actually they do it and they put on music and they leave, they come back. And so it's like they're not even there. And they have this attitude of, we're literally administering medicine. That's the job I'm doing. And the medicine does its thing. And so that's why you even think how important it would be to have that kind of guide. And the music truly becomes a guide. It's been that way for thousands of years. I think we have such technology and ability to make music and disseminate music and distribute it. It's like, I'm really looking forward to a renaissance artistically in this space, but we have to be able to support it commercially as well. Meaning, like, the artists have to have incentive for it to make sense. And doing long form music when there's nowhere to really license it, in a sense, doesn't make sense for them. It's the kryptonite. It's the like, everyone's like, well, make short songs, because if it gets 30 seconds, you get your stream. And doing a 30-minute song is hard to, but artistically, it's a really fertile space, because you can kind of do anything and take your time. And for me, I think that's what I love about it so much. It's less about my mind. It's more about improvisation and my heart space. And that's also bigger than I think of as just me. And that's helpful because it's like, let's see what wants to flow through. It's sort of a conversation with what's happening in the room, you know?
You know, that's interesting coming from a musician's perspective, and everybody has heard about Spotify business model and how little the musicians make and how you have to release music constantly and it's like churn, right? And I didn't even think about that if you're making, 30-minute songs or like a 5-hour song. There's a problem there. But here's the thing. So I recently went through, believe it or not, my first ever experience making my own playlist for my own journey. Because I have been very fortunate to have sat with people like East Forest and beautiful musicians and great space holders. So I have been one of the very lucky few that have always had live musicians or like been at a festival. So I curated and I realized the amount of time and energy I put into just making that one playlist, which by the way was hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I would have much rather just bought like someone else's curated playlist for a few dollars, or $10. Like, and that's where I said, I was like, why isn't there a Spotify for psychedelic therapy? And then I realized that's actually what Journey Space is up to. And then I realized Journey Space is amazing and maybe even too early.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what's going on with Journey Space?
JourneySpace.com. That's our platform. We tried to answer this question to provide online guidance, but also a bespoke music library to guide journeys. It's just hard to compete with Spotify and people's ease, and they think it's like free. But look, I'm kind of on a mission to make the playlist for psychedelic therapy irrelevant. Not that it's like bad, but I want people to understand it's like, oh, it's so inferior to what I could get with an intentional album. And people just maybe don't even think about those definitions or differences, and I get that. But in an album that was designed for it, and it's like a purpose-driven piece with one artist taking you from start to finish. In a playlist, one of the many disadvantages is every single time a new artist comes on, a new song, it's almost like a new soul walks in the room, and you have to sort of reorient to every aspect of this new production, sonically, energetically. And people don't realize the energetic drag that is because they haven't experienced alternative, because there aren't many options out there. As you said, traditionally, there's one person in there guiding you through, and there aren't a lot of recordings out there like the Music for Mushrooms album, but maybe there'll be more, And it's going to be more AI stuff in the near term. I think it'll be not very good, or it'll be artistically like quite washed out, boring, ambient type stuff, but that's the obvious thing that's coming really soon because it'll be cheap and free to do. And some of that generative music, it's easiest to do that in the sort of ambient space because it's, if you think about it, like why a computer could be like, I can make a stab at that. So within months, if not a year, and then it'll be exponential from there, you'll see in the wellness space, like very cheap, like music for that space. So I actually think it'll get worse. So it will be less incentive. That's another conversation. That's just my own predictions about what will happen to the recorded music space, period, the entire industry. But I think the ambient sort of side of it will be the first to go. There'll be artists that keep doing it. Artists do it because they have to. I make this music because I want to and I have to. But just it's what niche and role it fills inside culture.
I'm sitting here in shock because as much as I know about AI, I didn't even think about the AI music. Because that just seems like something that's like, how do you replace a soul, a human soul? Well, writing. I mean, I have very mixed feelings about AI, but I guess you're right. If I'm getting a massage and just listening to some, let's say that like Reiki healing track that they put on during the massage, I guess I could see where a computer could generate something like that. But a computer cannot take you on a 5-hour journey that's totally curated, that has its like exact moments. Like that's the one thing I've experienced with having a musician guiding the journey, a live musician and or a long recorded track, is that, like you said, it's the energy. Like I personally, when I went to make my playlist, I actually just started looking for the longest songs I could find because I don't like chopping up like, new soul, new energy. It breaks it up too much and then you don't get to go as deep in your journey.
Part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. Look, I mean, the AI thing, I think it will be disruptive in ways that I don't want to date this podcast in a way in the future, but it's going to be so seismic on so many ways in our lives that we can't even think about all of it. But at least in the music space, even if it will get very sophisticated over there. It just will. And eventually, I would imagine any song that you want could be written 100 times over in any style. Like, write me 1,000 songs, East Forest songs, but I want it a little more. I want some guitar. I want them to sing a little higher. I mean, it'll just do it. But you'll probably also be able to have the equivalent of the new Apple Watch that'll be getting your heart rate, your emotional response, your breathing, all sorts of biometrics, and it'll respond in real time to your journey. It'll do this without psychedelics even. It'll be just part of like responding to you. It'll make you the music you want to hear every day, almost like hey, I can tell you didn't get a lot of sleep, and here's your new playlist for the morning, and I wrote the songs for you. It's your AI. I would imagine this is around the corner, and most people will like it, and it will be responsive. But what happens? But that's just like, think about all the other industries where like a copywriter or whoever. I mean, some of these jobs, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And so in the music space, I'm not trying to be like doom and gloom. And some people disagree with me. Like, I think it'll be a whole bloom of creativity. I think that'll happen too. There will be all sorts of new tools where you can make music. Because if you think about it, recording on a computer, that happened around 2000-ish. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that. Like, I couldn't go through the studio model, which was its own form of technology. So, I mean, that was disruptive, and it did disrupt the industry. There's 100,000 songs uploaded a day to Spotify, and that's because of people can just record music on there. It's easy. Well, what if it's 100 million, a day? Or I don't know. But so I don't want to just be like, it will just be a change. I don't really know what that'll mean, but I'm just trying to advocate to say, and you're alluding to this, that there's a magic to sort of this interaction. In some ways, many reasons why people here at this conference is because of the human interaction. That will become more valuable. So in some ways, the live thing or the ceremony in person it'll be more apparent how powerful that is, and there'll be a hunger for it that will be even greater. So while there's more content and sort of washed out tools out there digitally, maybe this like ancillary upcropping, like a groundhog you push down, comes up somewhere else. The human need becomes louder to connect. So maybe that will be good. I don't know.
This is great because I actually had a vision come through a ceremony last year all about this. And this was before AI became really huge. And actually, it wasn't just last year. It's come through over the last few years about more in-person connection. Like, I personally, the reason why I've been loving it here is to just finally meet a lot of people in person that I've only met on Zoom, and then get to catch up with you. I haven't seen in, I don't know, the last time we saw each other in person. Yeah, a while ago. Old friends of ours from the same kind of groups in New York from back in the day. They're all hanging out here, and it's amazing. And I think if AI is going to start creating our own personalized music or whatever, or even any music, people like me especially, I'm sure a lot of people are going to crave more in-person music and more like live experiences. Yes.
It was all about, we're forgetting, we did an event. What was it actually called?
You named it Urban Ceremony.
Oh yeah, fuck.
We made.
What year was that? I know it was a love project. That's for sure.
2014 or 15 maybe.
Wow. So we had this idea of doing a whole weekend of events merging music with different modalities, from ceremony to yoga to dance, and we found this place called Lightbox.
Well, I helped open Lightbox.
Yeah, and what was the name of the guy?
Tom, my good friend.
Tom, is he here?
No, he's not here. Not that I know him.
Okay, so anyway, they let us do it in there at a really good rate, and it was like one of those projection spaces on all four sides, and we did it. And you did a ton of work on it, and we brought all sorts of different modalities of things to do during the day and evening. It was like a festival.
People loved it.
We put on a fucking festival. We were like, yeah, whatever. We're just gonna
2.5 day festival
in New York City
in January.
Yeah, we did it.
When it was cold as shit.
Yeah, and we did it. And I remember doing like cacao ceremonies, and like we didn't do any like straight up like we did yoga. And we had like an afternoon of like healing practitioners, a whole bunch of them. You could like wow. It was actually ahead of its time.
I know.
It's way. If we did that now, maybe 20,000 people. Be like, I want to come to that. And it was back then. We're like, come on in. And yeah, that was.
And I made friends from that who I'm still good
Urban
friends
Ceremony, man.
Yeah.
I feel like that brand might need to come back, actually.
I bet you know what? Maybe we should try to recoup our money. We totally lost money. We lost money for Tom. Thank God. Thank God.
Well,
People
yeah.
people
They donated the space for the weekend. I mean, they were doing a lot of corporate stuff, so everyone's trying to balance out the Toyota event they did or whatever. But I just want to give credit to like the efforts we did back in the day when we just went for it. And I do think that has some legs now, though. But anyway.
Because you were just a musician in this like kind of strange niche, you know? It's like
the music hasn't changed, right? It's just like the world changed since then. It's a multi-genre type thing. And the reason I think the music is a little different and unique is because it came from doing the ceremonies, and we were like, how do I make music for this? And that's why the looping and the field recordings and all that. And there wasn't any other consideration. It was not about how would I play it live or outside of this, or how would it sell. So it just had a very specific task for many years, 5-6 years before I even thought about like, it wasn't until 2015, and we started in 2008, that I did my first out of the ceremony. And it was for yoga festivals, because they hired me all of a sudden to do Wanderlust festivals. And that was 2015. And South by gave me a showcase. And I remember being so green. And that was it. And then we just started slowly doing it more publicly. And even then I also was trying to find my way, and I thought maybe I need to DJ this, or I do it like this. And I tried kind of like different angles of it. And then it wasn't until, honestly, I don't know, 4 years or 5 years ago, where I thought, why are we bringing in some of the original ceremony element? I feel like I kind of went away, and then I tried all these things that weren't quite working, and then came back to the source. And then it's like, oh, why am I just got to do what we do. And then also the world's been changing in alignment where there's a need for that. And it's sort of like saying, oh, I mean, we've happened to be working in this back room, so to speak, for a while, and we have something to share, and I'm happy that it's useful.
That's so funny, because I was thinking about that too. I'm like, wow, you know, like there's part of me that feels like, so I've been reflecting on. I remember being, I think it was 20 years old when I said to some friends that one day mushrooms will be legal in our lifetime. And they thought I was insane. But it just made sense. You know, it was like had such a profound effect. It's, you know, it's like a natural medicine. And then I was reflecting on those earlier days of like, okay, like, you know, not just like party days, but, you know, in this ceremonial settings, and now how it's being discussed, you know, on some of these panels here at this conference and some of these outside panels that I attended, you know, trying to bring in these elements of ritual and ceremony into, you know, people here who are talking about scaling, you know, therapeutic clinics. And it's like these different worlds. And I do believe there's this bridge happening, and there's this desire for a lot of us to want to, you know, bring in this experience into these other settings and have this kind of, you know, there's a definite demand for the healing, right? Like, I mean, to put in perspective, one of my clients helped open one of those psilocybin service centers in Oregon. The day they opened, they said they got like 1,500 inquiries, like within that week, because there's a demand, right? And people don't know where to go, and they don't know, you know, they're not friends with East Forest and can just attend a ceremony.
I thought you were going to say get a mushroom.
No, like people, no, but just to attend that ceremony and be in that setting. But you know, it was interesting. I sat with mushrooms and some of your music recently when I was doing my own little mini journey. And I was like, wow, East Forest songs are always just such tearjerkers. Like they really bring up such deep emotions and memories, and you know, like hearing the crickets in the background and the animals and nature sounds. And it was funny because I went into this really deep space where I was like opening up, and then I actually just started laughing to myself because I was like, I remember the first time I heard your music, it was in that setting. And
The first time.
no, the first time I heard your music was in a ceremony in like 2014. And I remember being like, whoa, mushroom ceremony, how cool. And I had actually to this day, one of my good friends, Elizabeth, who was sitting across from me in that room, I saw a heart drawn around her body, and I was so convinced that it was real, and I was like, and now I'm really good friends with her, and I'm like, yeah, and then that heart. But I look back, and I'm like, what did he know to design this music to tap into the deepest cells in our being, and like call in our ancestors and call in these like depths of like intergenerational emotions that are living in our cells? Like, I'm actually curious. I've known you all these years, and I've actually never known how the hell do you even come up with some of this music? Like, and I was like, maybe are you? I've never actually. You're a Cancer. I'm like, maybe, yeah. I was like, maybe he's just like a triple Pisces. But I was like, I'm pretty sure he's a Cancer. But yeah, I'm curious. How do you?
What's your sign?
I'm a Sag.
Oh, that's such a sad thing to say.
I know
No,
it
I always want to make that joke. Well, you're talking about space weather, so I don't know much about it. I'm actually making, with our dear friend Lewis, a film about this. It's called Music for Mushrooms, and actually the landing page is live now, so go check it out, musicformushrooms.com. It's about music and ceremony and mushrooms and how these elements play a role in transformation, or do they, and how does that work in this world we're in. And I think it's a really interesting question, especially the ceremony ritual piece, and well, what does that mean, and and of course the music piece. So we're really excited about that project and that conversation. But I was inspired by a lot of emotional music. I had a really powerful moment with Sigur Rós. Our friend Mark took me there in, I want to say 2005, at the Beacon Theater. And I didn't know them. So it's sort of like that was my discovery. And their second album had just come out. And he gave me like 1.5 grams of a chocolate mushroom. This is before East Forest, quote unquote. And I was just like, sure, whatever. And it was a seated show. And I just remember my life being so impacted by that show, showing me like what was possible through live music. And I remember walking down from 72nd or whatever, down to Columbus Circle at night afterwards, just shell-shocked, and sitting there at Columbus Circle by myself, just like feeling changed and inspired. And many things have inspired me musically, but that one was a big one in the live sense. And I decided to I got to change what I've been doing musically. Because before, at that time, I had this band I was doing. I'm not going to say the name, and it was like, exactly, you can't. It was pre YouTube, so it's not on YouTube. And I was just kind of started to shift. A seed was planted, and then I started to be introduced to ceremonies, and was invited to ayahuasca, and I just got really into my own transformation as things were falling apart. This new thing was starting to grow, and that's when we started doing this stuff. And my North Star was more like aiming towards a feeling that I had felt, that I think we all can feel, of that connection and numinous and infiniteness, that cosmic or emotionalness. And that feeling is where I was like, I want to get back there. I want to go back to God. And so you're kind of looking and playing with chord progressions and rhythms and combinations sonically that it would start to lead me in that direction. And that was it. I mean, it's just basically feeling essentially lost, and you're creating a medicine in real time to feel that thing. And over time, I think when you do anything in service, like you're doing it for other people, it's the golden rule. If you want to feel infinite, let's say, make someone else feel infinite, and now you feel infinite. So the more I would do this in these groups, the more I was feeling it, and it sort of feeds itself. And that was just really quite a gift for me, because I struggle a lot with my own anxieties and depression, and I don't think that creative force is what's kept me going and continually being able to tap into that feeling. And sometimes it's hard, and I gripe, and it's been actually really challenging to navigate this space of commerce and doing this as a career. And it seems like the bigger it gets, actually, the harder it gets. And I thought it would get easier. You know, like the more people you have helping, you're like, yeah, I finally have XYZ helping. And I'm like, why does this feel harder? So I'm really struggling, and not to change the subject stuff, but I'm struggling more with burnout and sort of relevancy to, like, I don't want to just feel like I'm on some hamster wheel of like, you do things because you're asked to, or does this help, or is this actually is this hurting? You know, like, I don't want to be, you know, what do you say yes to? What do you say no to? And then being able to pull it off with integrity too, not just being like, no, I'm just a parrot of myself, that kind of thing. Like, so that's the edge I'm on right now. I was so older. So it's like when I was in my 20s or whenever, it's like you hustle, and now like you're like, you need more support physically and mentally and emotionally.
Sleep. Yeah, burnout is real and it is true. The bigger you get, the harder it seems to be. The irony. But you know, I have one simple question: is do you actually engage in or take some kind of medicine, psychedelic or otherwise, when you create your music? Like, are you high on something other than life?
Well, yes and no. So when we do this ceremonies, yes, but it's small amounts, and it's more to bring the spirit in, and those are improvised, and so I feel like that's a very clear opening you're trying to tap into. And then when I'm in the studio, no, not so much. Sometimes it's certain. Well, it's also like this multi-elongated process, right? You're working on it over time, and there might be moments. I found that cannabis can be useful when you want to just really just have new ideas, but it's not like my day to day. Like I always get high to record or anything like that. And when I play live in outside the strict, or should I say pure ceremony space, it's hard for me to have any sort of substance, because there's so much just adrenaline that you're just rolling with that. It's about a focus thing, you know?
And okay, here's a good question. I don't know if we've ever talked about this or not, but I was just telling someone the other night the story of how I want to say it was 2015 or 16. I was in one of your ceremonies, and for the first time in my life, I saw a UFO. Do you remember that? Yeah.
I remember you saying that.
And it wasn't just me. It was a few people who saw it.
Outside?
Yeah, it was outside. And it was at the end, I shall say for the audience, it was at the end of the ceremony when I was pretty damn sober. And so was everybody else. Like, it was the very end. And this actually was a very profound experience. I mean, it was definitely a UFO. There was no question about it. And there were many of us that saw it, including sober people, because we had sober helpers in the room. It was something, you know what, I explained to this person the other night, because first of all, I saw it out of the corner of my eye while I was walking to the bathroom by the sliding glass door. And out of the corner of my eye, it was a very somatic experience. It was this knowing. There was a knowing in the corner of my eye that I am seeing something that is not from this planet. And it was like this feeling that I can never describe, because I've never felt anything like it in my life, because I had never had an experience of seeing something that was not from planet Earth. And I turned my head. I didn't go to the bathroom, and I walked outside, and I just stood there with, at the time it was like 2 or 3 other people, and we just stood there in silence, like staring, and then we're like, what the fuck? Like,
Was it a light?
it was and so yeah, you never ended up seeing it that night, huh? It was a light. Here's the thing, it was something in the sky, and this was also one of those moments of like, there's no way to describe this. It was up high enough where it wasn't a helicopter and it wasn't an airplane. It was in this weird height that was almost like you kind of couldn't feel if it was high up or down low. It had this weird feeling to it. It was like, well, it was like pink and green, and it kept jumping, and it moved in like non-linear pattern. There was no pattern whatsoever, and it kept moving around, and it would jump, and there were no trails. And here's another thing, the lights were not making a distinct pattern. So the lights would change in random orders and it would jump around in random order. So this is the only way. I was like, there's nothing, even drones, I mean, yeah, and this is back then, if that was a drone, it was highly sophisticated. And what was a drone doing in that part of the world? But then someone said that East Forest is known to have UFOs follow him. Is this true? Because I could believe that.
Well, I do hear a lot. They're like, the such and such beings were here, or this came in, or he called this and that. Oh, yeah, all the time. But this is my favorite line about UFOs. And this, because you kept saying you were sober. Terrence McKenna would say, people said, so you saw a UFO? He says, yeah. He said this big encounter. I want to tell you about it. And the first question they ask is, well, were you loaded? And his answer always was like, well, of course I was loaded. That's why I saw the UFO. Like, it's not a discount. It's like, it allowed me to see these things. And so it's just always funny to me that we're like, I was sober. I'm like, well, you're not going to see shit if you're sober. But it's a catch-22 of sorts.
But you have been known for this. Yeah.
I've just heard, it's been lots of strange things. Like, I was playing somewhere once and right as we finished, like on the door was this big praying mantis. And I'd been in and out of that place for 10 years. I'd never seen a praying mantis ever. Of course you hear people say things like they're able to see things through their own visions and what they think was in the room or what was cleared out or what, and that sort of thing. All I can say is I don't know. But I do think there's an important, it's good to note that like the spaces we're in, that the unseen perhaps influences us, and you can take some agency over that simply by making statements or saying like what you want or don't want. It goes a long way. Like, this is my space. Oh, nobody does that, but I often do it before events to try to do a little clearing, like as I'm speaking to people. I think I did it the other night because it's important. It's like we're opening ourselves up, and I think we do it all the time, but we want to think about our own psychic energy and our psychic hygiene.
Oh, yeah. Especially in places like this. 12,000 people. A lot of people high.
Please leave. 1-8.
Or there's people like me that are actually trying to call in the UFOs. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
Our friend Lewis, a long time ago, I said to him, I was like, Lewis, I really want to go to space. Really, it's just one of these dreams of mine, and I just want to get to outer space. He, with a total seriousness, he says, well, I don't think, if you really want to get to space, I don't think rivets and rockets realistically is your way. Probably your best effort is to do some meditations, try calling a UFO. And he was dead serious. He's like, that's probably the most likely versus trying to actually get it with a rocket.
So that's how the UFOs came. Anyways, East Forest, let's hear a little bit about what you have coming up in the next year, what's in the pipeline. I know right now you're on tour. Anything new, weird, exciting? I know you do a lot of collaborations. Yeah, tell us a little more.
Well, as I said, this Music for Mushrooms documentaries, we're working on that. It's coming out. You can sign up for updates on that. But I have a record called Music for the Deck of the Titanic that's rolling out right now. And so that's my new studio record. Yeah. And it's this first single's out. I don't know when this comes out, called Cosmic Dance, and it's awesome. And there's some more coming out next week, and it just kind of rolls out until August 18th. And I'm really proud of the record. It's probably different than what people have heard from me in the past. It's a little groovier. It's got some lyrics, and there's drums and some upright bass, and it sounds amazing. There's some deep instrumental cuts in there too, but I'm proud of it. And some cool guests on there, like Mary M. singing Duncan Trussell's on a track that is going to blow people's minds. That's hard to describe, but unlike anything I've done before. And DJ Anna, this amazing techno DJ, and I did some tracks together. And there's one on there, so there's some cool shit. So that's my next studio record, and I'm pretty pumped about that. And there's like videos that we've been putting out, and more to come. That just like exciting to work, with some of these people. And I'm self-taught as far as whatever that means, as far as like engineering and mixing, and I feel like I'm always learning more. So I'm really proud of the sound of this record. I think it sounds awesome. It just sounds like it's got mojo, but it's live. And I recorded the drums with this drummer, Jens Karas, myself, which was a huge undertaking, but they sound sick. So I'm excited about it. Yeah.
The title, is it's a little depressing, but maybe it's not. Is that just a take on the current state of the world? I mean, or is that just like, hey, let's come up with a fun title and maybe we need to party when the ship's going down?
Well, it's definitely a take on the current situation. It's like this. I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, that when the Titanic was sinking, that musicians played music on it while it was sinking. And I found that to be quite touching and beautiful. And I think about the times that we're in as a people now, and it feels like a ship is sinking or something is dying. And I often feel that I feel conflicted a lot. Like sometimes I feel depressed about it. Or should I be doing this? Should I not? Is this helping? Is this not? Is it hurting? And in that confusion, I was wrestling with that. And that's a lot of what the themes are on this record, about collapse and confusion and sometimes hope, though, and just all those feelings that I wrestle with that I imagine are quite widespread. And sometimes when I'm playing shows, and I'll think to myself, am I just playing music for a sinking Titanic in a way? And I thought, well, maybe this is just a midwifing process of death. And am I just a midwife for death? And if I am, that's kind of beautiful. But it's really something else being born at the same time. So it's both. And in that way, that's why the record, what I've been feeling these years and playing this music and touring around, it feels like music for the deck of the Titanic. Sure, it has feelings of grief. Grief is a big part of it. And also a newness that is somewhat unknown.
Yeah, definitely lots of collective grief. And, if we are all sinking, might as well go out celebrating, dancing, tripping. Yeah, I mean, there was a panel discussion on Tuesday with a few of my friends and actually all previous podcast guests that was kind of about this. It's like, well, if the world's basically going to shit, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to make the best out of it? And how are we going to at least try to, try to be the change or try to stand for something? But, I mean, who knows? One day at a time. But this is why we have beautiful music and lots of interest in expanding consciousness. And I do have faith that, who knows, maybe through all this and through all this interest and through the larger scale expansion of consciousness, maybe we'll have some something emerge out of it. That new little sprout that grows, and maybe we'll figure things out here on planet Earth. But until then, I'll be hanging out with East Forest, making friends with my UFOs. Can't wait to listen to this new album and check out Music for Mushrooms, the movie. Awesome. We'll put all those links up here in the show notes. East Forest, it was so nice, and what an amazing full circle to interview you here at Psychedelic Science, right? What a trip. Please come back and do a smaller ceremony one of these days when you get some downtime.
Thanks. It was awesome. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks.